The pre-sale for badges to the Rose City Comic Con is underway. It's coming to the Oregon Convention Center September 6th through 8th, and this year's lineup is stacked. Hayden Christensen, aka Anakin Skywalker, will be there, so will Rosario Dawson from movies like Death Proof, Sin City, and Men in Black 2, and Simon Pegg from Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Oh, and they just added Nick Frost. That's right, freaking Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. Plus a ton of cast members from your favorite shows and movies, along with your favorite comic book artists, authors, and so much, much more. Go buy your badges now at rosecitycomiccon.com.
Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about the Fred Meyer strike as the biggest grocery merger ever is debated in a local court, the frantic wrangling over plans as Measure 110 officially comes to an end, and the sky-high costs of building renovations as Portland Public Schools resumes classes. Joining me on this week's Friday News Roundup are Malia Spencer of the Portland Business Journal and our very own producer, Giulia Fiaoni. It's Friday, August 30th. I'm John Notarianni in for Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Hello, and welcome to the Friday News Roundup here on CityCast Portland. It's the time that we take a look at some of the biggest news of the week with some of the best and brightest journalists in town. And we got a lot of big news this week and some great people to break it down with us. Malia Spencer of the Portland Business Journal. Giulia, thanks for being here.
I'm excited to be best and brightest. That's nice.
You are the best and brightest. For a while, it was the best and brightest, and then us too. So you're here making us look good, Malia.
All right.
So before we get into the news, we like to start with an opening question so listeners get to know the people in the room a little bit more. And today we're going off of a comment that we got from a listener about this week's guide that we published to the Powellhurst-Gilbert neighborhood. We did that interview with Peter Condra, and Sybil wrote in, who lives in that neighborhood, and had some thoughts about Peter's suggestion that Kelly Butte might be haunted. This is what Sybil had to say. Quote, I found Peter's comments about Kelly Butte being creepy, a little funny. I live right by it, and my daughter hangs out there all the time. One of the major bummers about this area is that there's absolutely nowhere for teens to hang out. Kelly Butte and the Memory Garden, which we also talked about in the show, are pretty much my daughter's two spots that she goes to. So thank you so much, Sybil. She also went out of her way to name the best bar in the neighborhood the Rumpus Room. Never been. Sounds awesome. Shout out Rumpus Room. But I want you two to put yourself back in your 14-year-old mindset. If you were a teenager in Portland today, where in your neighborhood would be your hangout? And I can go first on this.
Go for it.
And I have actual data evidence to support this. So I live a few blocks from Roosevelt High School. And every time that I go to Fred Meyer on Lombard, around lunchtime, there is just a pile of backpacks in the front lobby. And it is completely swarmed with high schoolers. So I know all the teenagers in my neighborhood are hanging out at Fred Meyer around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And that's where I'd be too.
You know, I was thinking for my neighborhood specifically, there is this kind of strange Coca-Cola museum on 28th near Burnside.
Oh, yeah. Is that actually a thing? Is that actually a museum?
You know, I've never gone past just looking at it and thinking, what is that? So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
weird.
know. But right behind it, there is this little field and park with a kind of rundown playground. And I feel if I was a teenager trying to get out of public view and have my own space with my friends, that's where I would go.
Oh, I can imagine teenage Giulia hanging out at the playground. What about you, Malia?
So when I was in high school, my friends and I hung out at a coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in the Bay Area, kind of in a rural part just south of San Jose. And so there was a coffee shop in downtown that we just lived at. So I think I would be at the Stump Town in my neighborhood is where we would have probably encamped. I live near the original one on Division. And so it's kind of a low-key spot. And I feel we would have been there sitting outside judging people.
Yeah, that's classier coffee than I had as a teenager, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was drinking a lot of white mochas as a kid.
Yeah. Well, one shout out that I want to give, honorable mention, future awesome teen hangout place. Do you guys know Friends of Noise?
Oh,
No.
The
yeah.
group that does like all ages shows.
Mm.
So they're actually opening an all ages venue in Kenton
Oh.
coming up
Oh.
in a month or so. It's supposed to open mid-October. It's going to be a 5,000 square foot all ages venue
Wow.
that's opening up at the old Dancin' Bear strip club in Kenton. I don't know if any of you guys ever saw that.
Amazing. That's the most amazing Portland story. It went from strip club to all ages venue.
Because there
so
is
good.
like a bear dancing on the sign.
yeah.
And then they cross it out and it's like, it's like a strip
Bear.
club. So no more Dancing Bear, going to be an all ages venue. Well, thanks so much, you guys, for playing along. Let's get into the news. Malia, what are you looking at? You got the big one.
Yeah, it's been a big week. So there's a huge case going on here in Portland over the proposed merger of Kroger Albertsons, which is the number one Kroger and the number two Albertsons grocery chains in the country. So it's a big deal. A lawsuit was filed by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, to try and pause this merger for a while so they can like figure out a little bit more kind of what the implications are going to be and potentially stop it. And so there is a hearing going on right now, which is essentially a mini trial of the whole thing that started on Tuesday. And I think it's supposed to go for a couple weeks now. First, there was talk it would be a few days, but it's going to be a while. And so the grocery stores say that they have to do this in order to be competitive against like Walmart and Costco and Amazon. But the FTC and let's see, I think it's like 6 or 8 states attorneys general are arguing that if this goes through, it's going to be bad for consumers because there's not going to be the ability to kind of leverage prices between the two because they do compete on price. And then for labor, it's going to be bad because they can't leverage the two against each other in terms of their negotiations, which we see happening right now because Fred Meyer is on strike here in Portland. And so it's kind of all playing out in court right now.
Yeah. Well, I understand that your BFF Business Journal colleague,
Yes.
Elizabeth Hayes, has
She's been in the courtroom,
been in the
yes.
courtroom this week. What's she seeing?
Tons of fun. Well, there are 31 lawyers just for
Oh my
Kroger.
God.
So, I mean, that's like, this is a big deal.
Do they have matching suits? Like, do they coordinate their outfits?
That I don't know. I did see a group of people walking with like little rolly bags and suits and stuff downtown headed toward the Ritz. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that's the Kroger
The
lawyers
crew.
or
Yeah.
the lawyers in town for all of this. But these two combine, it's going to be 700,000 employees across the country that this is going to affect. So it's a lot of people
Wow.
Yeah.
in almost 5,000 stores. And if you look in like just here, Albertsons owns Safeway as well. So just think of how many Albertsons Safeways there are. And then Kroger owns Fred Meyer and QFC. So you've got all of that crossover. So
Yeah, the idea that, they're doing this so they can better compete with Walmart. I think that we all sort of have our own neighborhood grocery stores and it's clear who's competing with who. But like where I live, it is absolutely clear that the Safeway and the Fred Meyer are at two ends of the neighborhood and are in direct competition with one another.
Yeah.
And is it true that like one of the reasons they decided to like hold this trial in Portland is because we are one of the markets where they compete so fiercely?
yeah, Oregon is one of 8 states that have the most overlap between these all of these different stores and things like that. So that's probably one of the reasons. I mean, nobody's come out and said it, but it's likely one of the reasons that it's here. Somebody did point out, like, Judge Adrienne Nelson, who's overseeing this, she lives here. So she knows, just like you do, about, where things are and who's competing with who. And like, there's people from all over the country to watch this case, like media from all over the country. And they're bringing in like executives from lots of places. Like on, I think Tuesday they had a merchandising person from Sprouts Market, which isn't here, but they were here to kind of talk about, well, do these places that are kind of akin to like a New Seasons kind of a thing, like, do they compete? Because a lot of this also boils down to what does the competition look like?
Yeah.
And wasn't that guy basically like, no, actually, this has nothing to do with us.
Right. Well, and he also pointed out, he's like, they don't compete on price. And if you shop at those places, they're not competing on price. They're competing on other things. But there are a lot of people who shop on price. But a lot of this boils down to like, what does the market look like? And so the Albertsons Kroger are trying to say that competition includes Walmart and Costco and Dollar General, those kinds of stores. Whereas the FTC is saying, no, those don't count as they want a narrower view of grocery.
Well, I would have to agree because similar to what John said, there is no easy way to access a Costco or a Walmart in my direct neighborhood. It's always between those Albertsons and Fred Meyer options. And then if I'm feeling fancy, I'm thinking about a Whole Foods. It's just not practical to compare the two, because even just the sheer size of the items that you're purchasing at a Costco is not made with the thought process of the individual person in mind.
Right.
It's made for bulk and for families.
Yeah, you're not taking that home on your bike.
Yeah, somebody pointed out in one of Liz's stories that I think it was an FTC lawyer, you can't buy one avocado at Costco.
No. And you can't buy a regular sized mayo. It's going to be a whole 2 pounds.
Right. And the Sprouts person pointed out that those kinds of stores don't also carry the big named things. If you want to go buy Doritos, you might not be able to get it at those kind of more specialty stores.
So this is about Dorito equity as well. About
Exactly.
equal access to Doritos for all Portlanders. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's going on with this strike?
It started Wednesday. It's supposed to go through Tuesday unless they come up with an agreement. Interesting piece of that is that the union that's on strike right now initially backed the merger because they thought it was going to be beneficial, because Kroger Albertsons has been saying that it'll be beneficial for the union because their bargaining unit can go to the 700,000 people. And initially they thought it would be good, that there would be investment into employees and things like that, because the companies have been saying they're going to invest $1 billion to bring prices down and in employees and stuff like that. But then the union started negotiating and didn't see the negotiations happening in good faith and sort of changed their mind on the merger and decided it was not going to be in their best interest.
Yeah. And Christine De Leon in the Oregonian had some interesting reporting talking about how this is kind of a novel approach.
Yeah.
Having an antitrust lawsuit that is really taking workers' rights into consideration. Because
usually they don't. Yeah.
It's just all about consumers. And if this works, if the ruling is such that they decide, yeah, we are not going to allow this merger to go through. And one of the big reasons is that it's going to be bad for the employees. That can be good for workers all across the country in all sorts of different sectors.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of implications in this case, kind of beyond just grocery merger, looking at what is this going to do for M&A across the board? What is this going to mean for workers? There's a lot of stuff at stake.
Yeah. I also saw that workers at 10 New Seasons are doing a one-day strike on Sunday, completely unrelated. That's an issue where they've recently unionized and feel that their owners are sort of negotiating in bad faith. So they're doing a one-day strike. Don't you feel so bad for the New Seasons union reps that are yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to get all this attention and then just get completely blown out by this week-long Fred Meyer strike.
Right. Yeah. Although maybe it'll get more attention. There's going to be, so I live near the Hawthorne New Seasons and the Fred Meyer on Hawthorne. So I feel like Sunday is just going to be that entire intersection is going to just be
wild.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of honking, lot of pickets in the streets.
I didn't realize there were 28 separate stores on strike for Fred Meyer. I feel I thought it was maybe just a handful, but it's quite a few. And when it comes to other grocery stores having their own issues, I feel the issue just kind of compounds.
Exactly.
And everyone can kind of feel it. And maybe one of those things that leads more people to pay attention generally.
Well, remember, everybody was an essential employee, 4 years ago? And,
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you guys. I'm shopping at Grocery Outlet this weekend.
They have a great wine selection.
Great wine. Great potted plants if you need a little plant.
Oh, yeah. I go there for in the spring for all of my gardening needs.
All right, you guys, let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, more news of the week.
This year's Calvin and Mayho Tanabe Address, which is the annual lecture the OHSU Foundation puts on that brings thought-provoking speakers to Portland, is featuring a non-human keynote speaker for the first time in its nearly 10-year history. They're actually hosting Sophia the Robot, an AI-powered humanoid who has spoken at the UN and is the first machine to receive citizenship. Sophia has captured the imaginations of global audiences since her debut at South by Southwest 8 years ago. Her interactive talk takes place on Wednesday, November 13th at the Newmark Theater. It's all about the awe-inspiring potential of AI and robotics to advance healthcare and life sciences. So go grab your tickets today at ohsufoundation.org/Tanabe Tanabe. That's Tanabe. There are so many meal kits and food delivery service options out there, but imagine having your own personal chef that does all the planning, shopping, cooking, and even cleaning. They also take your dietary goals and restrictions in mind. Every meal customizable and made fresh to order in your own kitchen. And on top of all that, it's affordable, priced similarly to grabbing takeout. Sounds a little too good to be true, right? Well, Chefs for Senior is doing just that. They're a one-of-a-kind in-home meal preparation service that doesn't just deliver meals, they provide the chef. And it's not just for seniors, they're also serving those recently discharged from the hospital, new parents, and those who would rather just have someone else do the cooking so they can focus on the things they'd rather do. Check it out for yourself at chefsforseniors.com/portland.or. That's chefsforseniors.com/portland.or.
All right, Julia, what are you looking at this week?
Yeah, so my story comes from Noelle Crombie at The Oregonian and Anthony Effinger at Willamette Week, and they're talking about updates related to Multnomah County's drug deflection plan. And for listeners who are just hearing about this, some context, since House Bill 4002 passed this year, essentially rolling back drug decriminalization set in place by Measure 110, the county has been developing a plan for low-level drug possession cases that's supposed to go into effect this Sunday. Basically, the plan was for people suspected of minor drug possession to have a choice of either being arrested or going to a deflection center for an assessment of mental health, medical, and addiction needs, and eventually referred to relevant resources for treatment and detox. But as we know from last Friday's news roundup, the opening of the center at Southeast 9th and Sandy Boulevard has been delayed for at least another month, which means in the meantime, the county is utilizing a mobile response team of about 6 peer support workers from outside organizations that have lived experiences with these types of things. And they respond to calls from officers who find people with low-level drug possession, but only during the week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah.
So this brings me to our newest update from this week, which is related to enforcement. Police Chief Bob Day announced that outside of those Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. peer working hours, Portland police officers are just to arrest and jail people suspected of minor drug possession. So there's no deflection option at this point until that center gets open. Which, oh boy. But I want to hear both of your initial reactions to this recent update. What's going through your heads?
I just want to call out a quote from the Oregonian story from Multnomah County Circuit Judge Michael Greenlick, who pointed out, quote, "You happen to have an interaction at 8:05 p.m., you're brought to the court system, but if it's 7:55 p.m., you're out for deflection." I don't know. Has anybody been thinking about that concern? Which to me...
That was my initial concern when I saw the lead and it was like from 8 to 8. And I was like, well, what about after?
I think the thing that also is so stressful, immediately stressful for me, is just how much pressure is being placed on these 6 peer support workers to manage all of these cases as it is. And also considering that they have experience themselves, I can't imagine how exhausting it will be going from case to case to case to case and it's still not being enough and that being entirely out of their hands.
I also was just thinking about, like, we already have a problem with public defenders.
Yeah.
I don't understand. That problem's not going to go away. And so this is just going to complicate it further and potentially complicate people's lives further. Because once you get into the system, like, it's really hard to do anything afterwards.
Yeah, complicated with the fact that we also just approved a new homeless camping ban that will also be putting a certain number of people into the jail system, which, I just can't imagine that they have that sort of access capacity right now.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, that pressure to find resources for those individuals without shelter is also placed on peer support workers from outside organizations. I was speaking to someone recently who works at Blanchet House, and they were talking about how they deal with a minimum of like 30 cases a day for people who don't have access to many of the shelters in Portland because their needs are so high. So they're feeling the pressure to get things moving without any support because of these different policies that are being put in place outside of these organizations. And what's wild too is that the only alternative outcomes are also based on chance. So the other outcome Chief Day mentioned was that the officers will have the discretion to also issue a citation instead of making an arrest. And this is also entirely dependent on the volume of calls and demands of the day.
And just the cop that finds you.
Exactly, because that perspective of like volume of calls can vary from person to person. It's completely subjective.
Yeah.
I will say people have been speaking out. A quote from Mayor Ted Wheeler. He was saying, if we do not have a deflection center to take people to within the timelines that we have discussed today, I will immediately reevaluate the city's role in the county's deflection program going forward. And I want to be very clear about that today. So it sounds like there's going to be a lot of updates come October if things don't start moving. And there may not be the same kind of combined effort to get these things happen, which I think might put us in a worse scenario.
Yeah.
Well, I also wonder how this, because the Greenlight quote kind of brings it up, like, how does this also open it up to challenges for, equal treatment under the law because of that whole 755-805 thing?
Yeah. I think it was smart for Mayor Wheeler to sort of come out with a strong statement of like, we got to get this sorted out, guys. Like, we really got to fix this because, just thinking about the politics of it all, I know that we've been talking about the fall election every freaking day since like March. But I think there's a lot of people that are just going to be tuning in the next 2 months, and that puts the city in like a sort of terrible bind between having this really dysfunctional system that I think we can agree is like the worst possible outcome of like people going to jail, but in a way that just like is up to chance and makes no sense, or opportunists to sort of make political hay out of it and have some sort of superficial bandying about Portland being soft on crime, which I could just very much see that becoming a narrative if like this, this clusterfuck goes a different way. And I don't think that's in anyone's interest either.
So I want to mention one more thing before we wrap this up, because I just think it's wild how many updates and headlines have been popping up this week related to this story. So aside from everything we already talked about, it was also announced that the Escuela Viva Community School, which is the preschool near where the deflection center site is supposed to be, actually sued Multnomah County and many of the elected officials involved, alleging that they, quote, made plans behind closed doors to put a drug deflection center in the Buckman neighborhood in violation of Oregon's public meeting laws, according to Anthony Effinger's reporting. So that's also ongoing.
I feel like that lawsuit would have probably come no matter where they put it.
Yeah.
But it is true, like, this came up really quick that they were like, oh, it's happening in this neighborhood.
Well, it came up so quick, they couldn't even get organized. So, of course, the neighbors didn't know.
Yeah. And there was like a really nice quote in that article from one of the people associated with the school. It's like, look, I am not like a NIMBY type person. I just like want to be involved in this process of this very, very complicated establishment going in like a couple blocks away from my school. All right. Well, Giulia, thanks for summarizing all that. Thanks for getting us up to speed.
Yeah, thanks, John.
All right, let's take another quick break. And then when we come back, a little bit more news of the week. All right, guys. My story is coming due to some great reporting by Julia Silverman at The Oregonian, also some deep reporting by Rob Manning at OPB. School's back in session. 40,000 Portland Public Schools students are in the classroom. A lot is new. There's a new superintendent, Dr. Kimberly Armstrong. It's the first year that the schools are dealing with $30 million in budget cuts that happened this summer, which resulted in the loss of 200 positions. As we also talked about on the show, free breakfast and lunch for all students, which is pretty awesome. But I think one of the really exciting things is the grand reopening of Benson Polytechnic High School in Lentz. That school has been undergoing extensive renovations for many years. It's the sixth of Portland's high schools to receive that kind of big overhaul, and is part of this long-term plan that PPS has to modernize their buildings. It was also very, very expensive. Initial estimates was that it was going to cost $212 million to do this renovation. All told, it topped out at about $416 million, so almost twice as much money. It's Oregon's most expensive high school renovation ever. And it just sort of is a part of this long history of like, PPS has been trying to update these buildings. They've been working on it for 12 years, and the costs just keep going up and up and up. What do you guys think?
What I found interesting about what you pointed out, John, about the cost almost doubling for Benson specifically, it makes me wonder how soon they'll be able to pull the money together for those 3 last schools and how long that this will be pushed out. Because they had intentions to put it on the November ballot to have voters secure that money, but they've already pushed it to May of 2025. And that's just to get the money. That doesn't even consider the process and actually getting the work done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's going to be a complicated political needle to thread, because I think that voters are starting to get weary of all these school bonds that have been passing in the last 12 years. 2012, $482 million bond passed. Then in May of 2017, $790 million bond, which at that point was the biggest ever. And that's what was supposed to pay for the Benson renovation as well. But then the district had to come back to the public in 2020 for another $1.2 billion. And some of that money was to pay for some of these overages that have happened at Benson.
It seems like what they put into this high school in particular seems really smart in terms of like, this is the high school where people can do this like career training stuff. Like they have all these really intense labs and stuff like that. And that just seems like it's really needed to help students figure out what they want to do after high school. And Oregon has such challenges with getting students through high school and then also on to what they want to do after that and things like that. I'm looking at the pictures in the Oregonian and it looks pretty stunning, like the school. I mean, if you were going to that school, it seems like, you know, hey, you could see the options before you.
Yeah, Julia Silverman's article had some really nice imagery of like the kids going back to school on the first day and just being like, holy shit, this is
no
nice.
kidding. I mean, the what looks like a theater is beautiful.
Yeah.
And then they appear to have a cafeteria that has the like ad agency seating, you know, the like kind of stairs seating that all the ad agencies in town have.
Ad agency seating. It took me a minute to wrap my head around
It's
that.
also at the, I noticed it at the New Portland Airport. There's a big seating section next to elevator or escalators that are like, anyway, that's what all of the like creative agencies in town have. But anyway, they've got that in their cafeteria. That seems pretty cool.
Yeah. I was actually accidentally on the campus recently.
Oh, really?
I actually go and play soccer on that field occasionally. There's like a turf field behind the campus.
I was like, how do you accidentally end up there?
I know. I was like, oh, that was that place. Because I had noticed, I was like, wow, it looks like a really beautiful school. Like that's...
No, what you do, Julia, is claim that it was a reporting trip and that you're just really diligent at your job.
No, I just got lucky this time. I was like, that's relevant. I saw the thing. But I will say what's cool about this campus too that I'd love to mention is the population of students don't have to come from specific neighborhoods. Anyone can come here. It's one of those schools that's open to everybody, which I feel like if we're going to put a ton of money into one school, this may be the one that makes the most sense because it makes it more accessible and it makes the money, I think, go further in this case.
I mean, honestly, shout out to Portland Public Schools for having the foresight to have this campaign ongoing. I mean, there's reporting that it might take 30 years to get all these renovations across the board throughout the entire district, which is a long time and a lot of money because we're like 12 years in and still working on the high schools.
But it's also something that like these schools were built a way long time ago. And clearly there wasn't a lot added, like there was a big gap in it. So yeah, it's going to take 30 years to, you know, get caught up.
Wasn't there reporting that some of them still don't even have air conditioning?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about what the price tag's going to look like, you
I know,
guys.
that part's a bummer, but...
Here we go. So up next, Jefferson in Northeast, Cleveland in Southeast, Ida B. Wells in Southwest. They're estimating that's going to cost $1 billion to take care of those three. And the wish list that Portland Public Schools has for all of the construction and maintenance that they need, $2.9 billion. And school board chair Gary Hollins says that if he really accounts for everything that the district needs, it could be as much as $5 billion.
Oh my gosh.
Kids are expensive.
I wonder if we can come up with any ideas to raise money. Julia, do you have any ideas on how the kids can
Bake sale.
Bake sale, $1 billion bake sale?
$1 billion bake sale. That sounds like a game show.
What about this? Okay, here's an idea. We just saw that the first psilocybin chocolates had been approved at a private facility. What if we get high school students making mushroom chocolates, selling them across the country, raising billions of dollars for public education? I think this is a great idea.
I don't see any issues.
I feel like the DEA might have an issue with
I don't
that,
see
but
any issues.
yeah.
Come on. All right. Well, Malia, Julia, thank you so much. Thanks for walking through these stories with me. And
Always fun.
hope you have a great Labor Day.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for us this week here on CityCast Portland, but thank you so much for listening. Our host is Claudia Meza. Our producer is Giulia Fiaoni. Our Hey Portland newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and I'm executive producer, John Notarianni. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drisos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We're going to be taking Monday off for the holiday, but we'll be back Tuesday morning with a lot more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.